Why do we still continue to accept the police in our lives? This has been a question that has been floating around in my mind for the longest time now, but has since been largely reinforced recently due to the recent killing of George Floyd. Who was George Floyd if you're living under a rock? Well, George Floyd was an African American male who was killed by the police by one of the officers pinning their knees on top of his neck, thus blocking his airflow. And of course, there are videos showcasing Floyd begging and pleading for his life and telling the officers that he cannot breathe, while the officers just continue to stand there and not care, and that one officer who had their knee pinned on his neck continued to let their knee be pinned on his neck until he dies. So, really, after watching this video, how can one conceivably defend the police and say the police deserve to continue to exist? They're a good service to the public. They protect and serve the people. When all of this is obviously fucking false. Instead, let's finally call police for what they really fucking are. Thugs with badges and uniforms whose only purpose is to secure state power and to keep people in line with this capitalist fucking nightmare status quo. That's all the police really fucking are. They routinely target the marginalized. They do not help prevent crime whatsoever when they're fucking tackling down African American males for simply possessing marijuana when they give white mass shooters like Dylan Roof a fucking slap on the wrist. And what was the reason for George Floyd's death, you may wonder, if you don't know already? Well, George Floyd went into a store and used a counterfeit $20 bill. That's it. Police were called, and he did not resist arrest. He complied with the police because there was literal surveillance footage showing this. And then the police just decide to, pin his neck down with their knee and basically choke him to death. And the officers who were involved in the situation just simply got fired. They got fired, not charged for fucking murder. They just got fired. When you know in reality, if this was never caught on tape, none of that would happen. They would still have their jobs, and this would just be brushed aside because the police force is all about protecting themselves and not the public. This is why I say thank God for smartphone cameras, because if it weren't for everyone and their mother having a good-ass 4K camera in their pocket these days, these kind of incidents wouldn't be caught so easily. It helps show the public who the fuck these kind of people really are, and that they are not about protecting and serving the people, and it helps allow more eyes to be opened. And currently, a lot of eyes are opened right now. A lot of rioting going on in Minneapolis right now, and a lot of rioting in general going on around the country, because this is an outrage. This should not be fucking going on, and the people who are supposedly supposed to protect and serve us should not be the ones that are killing racial minorities and routinely targeting marginalized communities. And the general public is starting to finally realize that the cops are indeed not our friends, but instead are the very criminals that we should be weary of, because they do not give a shit about protecting and serving us like the state wants us to think. And people are starting to finally send that message out in the form of rioting. And I love rioting, okay? Especially when it's done in the name of social justice and a way to combat police brutality, because it is an effective way to send the message that we are fucking sick of police brutality. We are sick of the police unjustly killing racial minorities, and we are sick of the status quo in general, and shit needs to change radically and soon. And I don't give a shit what you think about rioting. You may see it as barbaric, but trust me, it is an effective way of getting the message across as opposed to just peaceful protesting. Trust me, Martin Luther King wouldn't have been as influential if it weren't for Malcolm X's tactic to scare the racists through the means of rioting and violence. So how much longer does it take? How many more of these instances need to happen before we finally start to collectively say, fuck the police, fuck the status quo, let's kickstart revolution, and finally do something better and instill a system that would work better for everyone, as opposed to the nightmare that we live in now, because this shit cannot continue. This shit cannot keep going on, because we know more and more racial minorities will be killed, more and more racial minorities will be unfairly profiled by these pigs, and this shit can't keep going on. We need to put an end to this. We need to help our fellow people, especially those who live in marginalized communities, who is routinely targeted by these fucking people. And I don't want to hear the same bullshit, oh, these are just a few bad apples, there were plenty of good cops out there. Can we fucking stop with this fucking bullshit excuse, this bullshit justification for this shit going on? I'm gonna steal an example that Chris Rock used. I came across this clip last night. Would you say the same about pilots? You know, some of our pilots like to land, but there's still a few of those out there who, you know, fuck up and crash the plane. He didn't say that verbatim, but, you know, it's the same general idea. Would you say the same in that instance? No. But when, it's targeting racial minorities, it's not that big of an issue. It's something that we should just brush off and realize that, you know, it's something that's a problem among some cops, but not all of them, so let's ignore the bad apples and just focus on the good. No. No, every cop is not your friend. They all have the same end goal: impose power on the general populace under the illusion of protecting the general populace and serving the general populace, when in reality they're stepping all over you. They're not serving you, that you are serving them instead. And they do not give a fuck about you, and you should not give a fuck about them. Stop trying to excuse situations like this. Stop trying to be like, oh, well, the guy committed a crime, so that's kind of why the police were the way they were. And I already know the conservatives are going to use this as an excuse. I haven't looked at what conservatives had to say about this situation because, honestly, I'd rather not subject myself to that. But George Floyd was arrested for armed robbery back in the 2000s because of a home invasion. And I know conservatives will be like, oh, this man was previously in prison for a few years. He was convicted of an armed robbery. He was dangerous. So, you know, we're not racist at all. We don't like seeing black people killed at all. But this situation can be excused because of that. No, nothing excuses this situation, no matter how the fuck you slice it. He went to Minneapolis to have another go at life, to become a better person, and the police took that away from him. He left behind a daughter, he left behind friends who loved him, and even gave him the nickname Gentle Giant. The man seemed like he wasn't a threat to anyone anymore, and yet he had his life snuffed out by these fucking pig cops just like that, because, oh, he used a $20 counterfeit bill. Yeah, totally a crime worthy of death. But no, continue to excuse this. Continue to try to find any justification you can for this situation, just like you did with the Ahmaud Arbery situation, because, oh no, he went into a house for like 5 minutes and left empty-handed right before his death. Yeah, that totally excuses him getting gunned down in the streets. Just admit it. You like seeing African Americans get killed. You like seeing racial minorities in general get killed, but you just don't want to admit it because, of course, you would face a lot of scrutiny for that. But you still try to find these bullshit justifications to excuse their heinous fucking deaths. So just admit it. You love the current system. You love how it disproportionately targets racial minorities. That makes you happy. That makes you sleep better at night. Whatever, at least you would have no shame in admitting that. And one more thing I would like to bring up. 2 of these officers who were involved in this situation have already been previously reviewed for using excessive force. One of these officers shot and wounded an indigenous man back in 2011. So already some of these cops already had pretty shady past to begin with. And you would think, you know, actions like this would exonerate them from their jobs and, you know, they wouldn't be cops anymore. But no, they got to keep their jobs. And look at what happened. They continued to use excessive force, and now they're responsible for the murder of an African-American man who posed no threat to anyone anymore. Great going. Laws don't prevent crime. Police do not prevent crime. We need to go after the socioeconomic reasons as to why one commits crime, and we need to have more of an emphasis on mental health in general. Just throwing these people in prison and having these fucking power-hungry pigs running around and trying to enforce laws does not work and does not curtail crime in the slightest. Just throwing someone in a cell does not go after the reasons why one is driven to commit crime in the first place. And I really wish more people would realize this, and I really wish more people would realize brutal force imposed by the state is not acceptable, and we should stop embracing those who serve as a way to enforce said brutal force imposed by the state into our lives. Something has to fucking change, and the system that we live under does not work, and it needs to go. And until that happens, we are still going to see situations like this continue. You think just because a lot of people are outraged over this and speaking out against this, that the police force will just magically stop doing things like this to racial minorities, even if they may be innocent or committing a non-violent crime? No. So please, open your eyes and begin to start advocating and enforcing change, because we desperately, desperately fucking need it. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Bye-bye.